Hey guys, Colin from Track Attack here, back at the Safe Auto Vault for another awesome paddock review. Today, we're going to be looking at the best Japanese sports car that Japan never built. So today on our paddock review, we are reviewing this gorgeous red 2020 Toyota Supra. And with me, we have David, our resident BMW fan and expert, of course. Sure. So thanks for joining us today.
For sure.
I'm giving you that title today, okay? So there you go, you got it now.
All right, I'm the expert.
Yeah, but that comes with expectations.
All right.
So again, reviewing the Supra today, let's talk about the elephant in the room, BMW. Everybody knows this is a BMW at the end of the day.
Take away the robe and it really is just a BMW underneath.
It is. And you know, we have the purists out there and they have their arguments and people argue back, and the facts are facts. This is 95% BMW.
Yep.
That being said though, does that make it any less of a sports car?
I don't think many people would argue that a BMW is a bad thing when it comes to driving dynamics.
Sure.
They've done it, they've been the go-to brand for that, and that may be changing in recent years, but could this then be one of the last BMWs that still is great to drive? Although this isn't a BMW.
It depends on the badge, I suppose. It depends on the day.
Yes.
But yes, so it's true, right? I mean, BMW always has been known for its handling dynamics, that 50-50 weight distribution. You know, it's been for decades, right? So nothing wrong there at all. Now, Toyota, of course, has a long lineage of classic sports cars, obviously, racing, things like that. And of course, the Supra badge itself carries so much weight in the car enthusiast community. And that was the big upset with this car when it came out, once everybody realized it was a BMW chassis, power plant, blah, 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 blah. So the purists, and I'm saying this too because I'm a big Toyota fan. I've owned many Toyotas. I've even owned a Supra back in the day. I'm a big Supra fan. So when I first heard about that, I was a little upset. I'm not going to lie. However, the first time I drove this car, especially on track, it completely made me a believer. And you know, that's saying something because I'm a bit of an elitist snob when it comes to cars, and I'm usually not very gracious when it comes to complimenting sports cars and their handling dynamics and things. And this car honestly won me over. It was fantastic on track.
Well, and if you're going to be the Supra guy, I will own up, I'm the Z4 guy. And this seems to be a bit of corporate monogamy in terms of, okay, we have some trade secrets to share. Let's share some platforms and that'll work out as well. So badges aside, is this maybe the Z4 Coupe that isn't? Because they've got the convertible, Supra's got the coupe version.
I would argue this is the M4 Coupe.
Exactly.
That's what this is.
You know where I'm going here. It really is that modernized, you know, rear seating position, like you said, 50-50 weight distribution, good weight to power, lots of traction, but a little bit of a lively rear end.
Yes.
It's a fun car.
Yeah.
You said it. It really has come around in terms of we're maybe confused about what this car is supposed to be and all arguing about, is it a Toyota, is it a BMW, is it just a good sports car? I think everyone can agree.
You hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly it. That at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if it does to you, fair enough, that's cool, right? But if you want to buy a car because of the badge, then great. Don't buy this car because, yeah, there you go, right? But if you want to get a good sports car, this is it. This is a great sports car. Again, we talked about just the handling dynamics alone, in my opinion, is by far the best Supra ever made. Let's face it, even the Mark IV, the legendary Mark IV Supra, it's known as one of the best sports cars ever made, the best thing Toyota's ever made. It's a legend in the Japanese, car community. Everybody knows the 2J. It's great for making power. Guys drag race the car. It had great handling dynamics, but let's face it, the Supra was not exactly known to be a corner carving machine. That's not really gained its reputation.
You said it earlier. It was a grand tourer. That was kind of the goal. And going back to that, we weren't supposed to dwell on this, but the BMW in this, they make a grand touring type of car. Yeah. So is this the balance now where you've got an automatic 8-speed, lots of aids throughout the car to keep you on the road and keep you comfortable, you know, your CarPlay and your Android Auto, but like you said, take it to a track and still have a ball.
Absolutely. Yeah. And interestingly enough, when this car first came out, I also had the chance to autocross one. And I think that really is a good test of a car's handling dynamics. Because, you know, on a big open track, it's a lot of horsepower, it gets some big sweeping corners. Autocross, it's just a minute of handling and pitching a car around like an idiot. It's good fun. And I remember when we did this with Supra when they first came out. And in fact, I think I was probably the first guy in Canada to autocross one of these, to be honest, which is kind of cool. If you're an autocross nerd, to everybody else, it doesn't matter. But anyway, that I was so shocked at how well the car handled. It literally felt like a Miata with a lot more power. The handling dynamics were that good. In fact, at the event I was at, it was an event with about 130 competitors. And if I remember correctly, I think I placed, I think it was 12th overall, I think, in raw times. And that was with a stock car on stock tires, stock alignment, you name it. And I'm talking like raw times, not in terms of classing, because we're talking like modified Miatas running slicks and stuff like that. The car was that good in terms of its handling dynamics. And I think that speaks volumes about what this car is really about.
To further that point, right after you probably finished that event, drove home in comfort.
Absolutely.
Right? It does both. There's no Jekyll and Hyde-ness to it. It just does both very well.
It does, absolutely. So to prove that point, let's walk around the car and kind of check out some of these points that allude to this, shall we?
For sure.
Start in the front. Now, one thing I have to say I do love about the styling of the new Supra, it's a bit subjective. Some people are loving it, some are hating it. I really like the front end of this car.
Oh, I guess.
There's my point right there. So, but I like it because modern styling, obviously, with the you know, all the vents and everything going on. It's a very busy front end. I like all the swoopy angles and stuff like that. I like the headlight design. I like the way it has this very sort of little F1 kind of inspired little nose thing going on here. I like all that. I like the visual appeal of it. I think it ties into the car. Again, like I said, some people maybe not as much.
For me, I can narrow it down to one thing in particular. These headlights, if you take them out on their own, they're just so massive. And I get the idea of the swooping signal.
Yep.
I love that, but it just seems so large. And that small little detail, if they just cut those few inches off there, you'd almost would have nailed the progression of the Supra taillight from the Mark IV to this.
True, that's right. If you actually had gotten rid of that little slit there in the front, it would be very similar to the Mark IV. That's true. That being said, though, this car definitely pays homage to that Supra styling throughout the ages. No doubt about that. I think that shows in the car. But again, you think about the Mark IV, that's an old car. That was designed in the late 80s.
Yep.
You know, and came out in the 90s. So if you think about that, I mean, that was many, many moons ago. So I get that they're really trying to give a modern take on this car while still, you know, having some of that old flair. And again, that's why I kind of like the way they styled it. But to your point, I agree, it is a bit of a departure for sure. But I think it kind of had to be given that time frame.
The curves of this car overall, and I know we're going to get to my favorite part, which is the rear. But overall, the curves of this car looked great. If we talk about the concept of this car, it was fantastic,
yes.
Gorgeous. The problem is, and this is where I will narrow in on the BMW-ness of it, because they decided to shrink this car over the wheelbase of the Z4 platform, some of the proportions got squished. And it takes away from that aggressiveness. Overall, though, a gorgeous car. The roofline, a little bit of that old throwback bubble roof. Yep. It's got good, powerful bulges over the wheels and the hips. It is a gorgeous car. Not my favorite part here, but there's no denying it is a great looking car overall.
It absolutely is. They did a really good job with the styling. Again, like you said, a lot of, you know, cues from the previous Supras. Speaking of styling, from far away, there are some very nice pieces of this car that don't look so good once you get a bit closer. And you know I'm talking about the fake vents.
The fake vents.
Styling-wise, again, they do suit the car. They add some elements. I like them until, again, you get within about 15 feet, because then you can tell they're cheap plastic fake vents.
And they're everywhere. It's not just one or two. They're everywhere. Now, I was talking to the owner of this car. I've read a lot of press stuff about this car. The fact is, even Toyota said, you can take the vents out and they're functional.
Are they? Because
some of them, maybe.
I've looked at that. If you pop the hood and you look on the other side of that vent, there's metal there. Yeah. You would have to take a Dremel or something, cut through You have to find a way to do that. Like, you can't just pop the vent out. That's not the solution.
I think you bring something kind of close to my idea for where this car is going to go in the future. It seems to be low volume right now. As great as it is of a car, it's not really flying off the shelf. Maybe that's the price point, maybe that's the marketing. But I think the secondary market is going to blow up because, that guy or girl who's willing to take a Dremel to something that's out of warranty, it's going to happen. And I think at that point, it will start to blow up again. And because there's so few of them that have sold, we'll see. But there is other motors that are coming.
True.
Lower price of entry, there will be a 4-cylinder. Got to talk about that. It's the same thing like the lower end Mustangs or low-end Camaros.
Yep.
Having a smaller motor brings down the price of entry, lower insurance, more people getting into it. So will we see more of these? Because in dynamic fashion, they're great.
Yes, absolutely they are. Speaking of styling, I also want to talk about other things that are slightly more functional. You do have this nice little side skirt here, which I'm sure adds, a little bit of function to the car. I haven't tested it, so I could just be saying something I'm not sure about. Styling-wise, it looks beautiful. I like it, especially with the black and red. Looks great. The one thing I find interesting about the Supra 2 is the choice of tire sizes. It comes with nice, fat, meaty tires here. This owner obviously has winter tires on right now, but even the factory rubber is pretty meaty on this. And for a small wheelbase and a fairly lightish car, I think that helps the handling dynamics a heck of a lot on this car, especially in the rear, because this thing is a torquey motor. And let's talk about that for a second, the motor. It makes really good power stock. There's
335?
335 on paper.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
on the dynos, it makes a lot more, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's been proven time and time again. So that's the one thing I think that really hurts this car is that, the numbers on paper aren't exactly fantastic, and yet the actual real world performance is far beyond what the numbers would suggest.
Yeah.
So, I think that really helps, lend to what this car is really capable of.
If we're going to talk about the engineering, not only that, the motor has such a breadth of power and torque. You're always in the zone you want to be because you've got 8 gears to go through.
Yes.
So you are always in the zone where you need to be. That's almost too many. But it's just right for this.
Yes.
But if we're going to talk about the contrast, again, of how confusing this car can be, engineered well in one regard and just a fall point on the other, this car has some serious buffeting issues. You get this car anywhere over about 75 kilometers an hour with the windows down, and you might as well put earmuffs on because it just pounds at you.
Sure.
Now, this owner's made a $5, $6 part difference that worked. But why did it take that? Why wouldn't they think? Most people who drive a car like this want to have the windows down at some point, want to rustle, feel the wind in the hair. They don't want to have that pounding air flap against your ear. Again, that fake vent, that buffeting, the truth behind certain elements being fantastic,
Yep.
well engineered, and then fall points where they just forgot.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde sometimes with this car in that way, where some parts are very well thought out, well engineered, and you have other points like that clearly weren't.
Yeah.
So it does make you kind of wonder. Speaking of engineering, let's move to the inside and let's see all the BMW influence, shall we?
For sure.
First thing I have to say, as soon as you get in this car, and if you're familiar with any other modern BMW interior,
Yep.
you get in this, and it's BMW everywhere. This is BMW.
Literally, you can't hide it, and that's the thing. Is that bad? Take away the fact that we know this is literally sitting in a BMW. Mm-hmm. Let's just talk about, if you were looking at this car, are the materials good?
You know what? It is a nice interior. You can't deny that. For the price point, I think it's quite nice. Like, it's well appointed. It's got nice soft touch materials everywhere. It's got leather. I mean, the styling is very clean, very efficient German lines. Like, it's got that German interior. So no, it's definitely not a bad interior at all. Again, as a Toyota purist, of course, I'll sit here and say, it doesn't have a Toyota feel to it. Like, Toyota has a very distinct styling to their cars, which in most of their cars is pretty boring, but their sports cars not as much. Yep. So I would like a little more Toyota influence on the interior as a, snobby Toyota purist. But again, I still can't fault the interior. It is a nice interior. It's comfortable. It's functional, and it does look nice.
You said it. It's the Japanese styling versus the German styling. Mm-hmm. It's different. It's not bad, but it's different.
Yes.
The one thing I will highlight is I truly do love this dashboard in terms of the driver focus, center tack, very purposeful, versus that funky BMW hexagonal, whatever they got going on.
Yeah.
This is more of a driver-oriented dash. and that speaks to the car.
That I agree with you for sure. I do like the layout, like you said, very functional. It's got the centerpiece. And I like how it changes and stuff. It's got the modern LCD display. It's very cool, very techy, and yeah, to your point, it's functional. It works. Like it's not overdone like most BMWs. So I think Toyota did a good job of Toyotaing that.
Yes.
Toyotaing, is that a word?
Just that part.
The other thing too I like about this, it's got a very cockpit feel to it. Like I love the seating position of this car. I love the way the visibility is, even for a short guy like me with the long hood. Great visibility, super slanted windshield, but you know what? It still doesn't do too much to the visibility. I can still see. I'm short. Maybe taller guys might have an issue.
You know what? And that's where that bubble roof comes in, where at least you do have that height. I'm 5'11", and I see that this is fine. And my one buddy's like 6'4", is always, well, where can I? Of course, he'll fit in here too.
Yeah.
The thing is, you look through this exterior, through the windshield, and it does speak Z4, even back to the Z3, where you have a long hood out in front of you. Long, like read it long, and anyway. The point is, you can see where you're putting the wheel. Those arches are where your apex is. You plant that wheel, that's what you need to see. Might be an issue to park this, you may not see that long nose, but when we're talking about putting the wheel where the apex should be, you can see it.
You can, yeah. It's actually, it kind of feels like a big car in some ways, but when you're driving it, it feels very small. Like you do feel that small wheelbase, the driving dynamics, the car feels very light and small. It, again, that lends to the whole sports car credibility of the vehicle itself.
You know what the rear axle is doing because it's literally right there.
You're sitting on it.
You're sitting on the rear axle.
Yeah, which is pretty cool because I like that hark back to the old front engine rear-wheel drive thing where you had that very rearward seating position back in the day. I kind of like that. Very 2000 GT actually, the very sort of granddaddy of the Supra, if you will.
Yeah.
So it does have that very sort of layout, and the looks and styling of the car kind of plays a bit into that too because of the layout of everything. So
So it is
I like
Toyota.
that. It is. There you go. See, there you go. We decided it is Toyota. So there we go. Verdict is out. It's Toyota. Now, unfortunately, the part that's not Toyota is the engine. So let's go take a peek at that, shall we?
Yep. See the German with a plastic cover on it.
That glorious BMW-derived B58 power plants.
And you say that like it's a bad thing, but the straight six has been around and perfected forever by BMW.
It's true. Very Porsche-like, right?
Yeah.
Yep, it's true. I mean, it seems to be a German thing, apparently.
The thing is it's very efficient at what it does. They've gone over this motor, poured over. They've won countless best engine awards.
They have.
Lots of power, a good, strong turbo that's small but spools up quick.
Yes.
Right? The idea that there's just enough of that push to feel that turbo rush you in as you accelerate, but not too much lag either for daily driving.
Sure. And you know what? You're right. Again, as a Toyota purist, I'm sitting here knocking the engine because it's not a Toyota engine, but I can't fault it. It actually is a very good engine. The power numbers alone, it makes torque everywhere. It makes good horsepower. And again, as we know, on paper it says it makes X, where in reality it makes a lot more. Yeah. It pulls really good rate to redline too. Some modern turbo motors make good torque, but they kind of gas out near redline.
They do.
This doesn't. This actually pulls strong rate to redline. It has a very sort of sporty power band, which is actually worth mentioning because remember, Toyota did do some tuning to this engine though, after all. They tuned the ECU and everything else. Right. And the one thing I will have to say that Toyota did a good job on this engine was the tuning. Because if you drive the BMW variants, like in the Z4 and things like that with this engine, it doesn't have that same sporty characteristic as it does in the Supra. So definitely tuned it for probably a little better throttle response, maybe a little more top end pull, whatever it is. It does have a very sporty feel to the engine, and they did a good job with that.
And let's talk about the engine and just overall engineering between the suspension. Toyota did tweak many things to make it their own. Absolutely. Is it the same underneath, same parts, but there are certain variations, yes. And that's what makes it that drive, that sound, that crackle after you let off the exhaust. There's those little things that they do that are...
Make it sporty and make it different than the average BMW, yes.
Just enough to make it their own.
Yes, and I agree, and I think it's enough to still make it their own, to your point. That's a good point. That it's not a BMW in that sense. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, it's got the parts and stuff in it, but it does have a very unique driving characteristic versus an actual BMW, like a badge BMW.
Elephant in the room, I wanted to bring this up the whole time. It's got a beautiful mated automatic. Yes. 8 speeds, great for touring.
One of the best in the business.
For sure. Speed, yeah, but if we're talking about what this car does in terms of its weight, its power point, and just the dynamic of it, would this not be the perfect car for a manual?
Yes, I would love to see this thing in a manual.
Right?
Yeah. But then again, modern engineering and who's going to buy it, manufacturers, they don't make manuals for many reasons now, which is sad as an enthusiast, as we know. But to your point, I agree, this would be a really cool car in a manual.
And is that the part of the marketing in terms of trying to hit a market that they're just slightly missing the point? I think at this type of car, we're hitting a time where people might actually pay for the option to have the manual.
I would.
I would too.
I would. So I think we agree, in spite of it being a BMW, Toyota, it doesn't really matter. It is a really good sports car. And not just a good sports car, but actually a good car. Because again, performance is there, we talked about that. It's got some good bits in it. Toyota did a good job with the tuning, but it's still a good BMW in the sense it's a Grand Tour. You can drive it, it's comfortable, it'll get you to the track. You'll have a heck of a lot of fun at the track. You'll put down really good lap times, and that's it. So the thing is, then, why is everybody so confused with this car? I personally think Toyota did a really bad job of marketing this car when it first came out. Lots of hype around the car, that was great. However, I don't think they really made people understand the direction or the goal of this car. Because like we talked about, the original Supra was a bit of a GT car, everybody knows about it, makes good power. But this car isn't that anymore, is it? It's not meant to be really a Grand Tour. It's more of a pure sports car, in my opinion.
The problem is they kind of let the internet just go away with whatever the thoughts were. And unfortunately, the internet dwelled on the fact that it was a BMW. As you said, be it marketing, be it the corporate aspect, be it where the badges are placed or the vents. The fact is we got lost in so many other things about the Supra rather than just focusing on the fact that it is overall a good car.
Yes, absolutely. I think, the sum of all its parts isn't really what this is about. It's actually something more. And yeah, people are missing out on that. And you won't know until you've actually experienced one of these cars. Again, like I was one of those guys. When it first came out, I was like, oh, it's a BMW, it's not a Supra, boo. Then I drove it, and I'm like, I get it. I get what this car is about now, and I don't really care that it's a BMW now because it's a really, really good car. And I think that's the thing. As more and more people have the opportunity, hopefully, to experience this in some form or fashion, then maybe they'll start to understand, sure, it's got BMW parts, but at the end of the day, I mean, let's face it, what car's built nowadays that's not really some joint venture?
They're sharing parts all the time.
It's common in the industry, it makes sense financially, it's a good business decision, it happens. Doesn't mean that you still can't make a good sports car. So at the end of the day, I still say 2 thumbs up for this car. I love it. And I think, if you're looking for a sports car in this price range, this is honestly one of the best options out there.
No-brainer.
Yep, exactly. So that being said, I got to say, again, thanks so much for joining me today, David. Really appreciate you having out with me in this car and sharing your opinion and your insights. And again, I know I'm looking forward to us getting out and driving some of these on track this summer. And with that, guys, as always, make sure you like and subscribe the videos, the channel, because we have lots of exciting content coming up. Remember, we're getting very close to season 2 of Track Attack, where we will be on track. We will be driving cars like this and having a heck of a lot of fun with you guys. So drop your comments. Let us know what you thought about the episode, what you think about the car, maybe what you think about our hair, whatever works for you. And with that, guys, we will see you at the track.